So you've decided that you want to start a Star Wars action figure collection. You have no idea where to start. You get on sites like Amazon and eBay and you're overwhelmed with the infinite amount of possibilities of where you can start. You might see a character you really want and think to yourself, oh my goodness, that's an extremely expensive action figure. You might get on social media sites and other forums and ask people's opinions, and you get bombarded with millions of different ideas of what you can do for starting off your collection. Well, this video is for you. I'm going to go through 10 Star Wars action figures that I would recommend for beginners. So while the action figures in front of you are debating it out, I'll go through some of the criteria points I have for these top 10. The 10 action figures are in no particular order. Number 10 is no more or less important than number 1. Similar to my other top 10 videos, it's just 10 action figures I would recommend. And another criteria point is price. Is it an action figure that's affordable for the average person? I don't want to get on eBay and a character I really want and it's $100. I want it to be consistently, I would say in the $10 to $20 range is fair. So that's going to be included with all 10 of these action figures. Another one is how popular is the character? To me, I think it's a good idea to have the foundation of some of the most important characters for any collection. That includes characters like Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, you name it. All the main characters. Kind of hard to have a Star Wars action figure collection without having some of those core characters involved with it. And also, is it an action figure that holds up well over the years? Is it one that is completely out of date now and is no longer relevant? Or is it one that 20 years later, it's still a solid action figure and holds up to this day and it will fit in with anybody's collection, no matter if it's a modern one or an older collection? I know some people are probably saying, oh, when you're starting off action figure collecting, just get whatever's in stock right now and whatever's brand new because it's at retail price. But I'm looking at this from the perspective of all the action figures are out of production, and the only source you really have to go off of is on eBay. So imagine what those prices would be like if all Star Wars action figures were out of production and Hasbro Star Wars ceased to exist now. So these are 10 action figures that I still think would be relevant and affordable for most people, even if that were the case. Without further ado, let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into figure number 10. So figure number 10 here is Anakin Skywalker, or Darth Vader as his package was called. He was released in the 30th anniversary line, and I think this is a solid action figure. He's arguably the best Anakin Skywalker still that we've gotten to date, for the Revenge of the Sith, that is. I include this action figure in my top 10 Jedi that I want to see updated in the vintage collection. Even if that wasn't the case, or even if it does end up happening here soon, I still think this is a solid action figure. He looks very close to the likeness of Hayden Christensen. The articulation, I think, is phenomenal. He does have swivel elbows, which I know is a complaint for a lot of people, but I don't think it's a huge hindrance for this action figure. He doesn't include a robe. I just happened to put an extra Anakin robe I had on him. But it's just a solid action figure all around. And Anakin Skywalker is arguably the most important character in the Star Wars saga, so I think he's essential for everyone's collection, and I would highly recommend him. Figure number 9 here is what would Anakin Skywalker be without his master Obi-Wan Kenobi, and arguably Obi-Wan Kenobi's most iconic look at this point from Revenge of the Sith. Similar to Anakin or Darth Vader, he was released at the end of the 30th anniversary line in 2008, and he also received repacks throughout the Saga Legends line similar to Anakin. So he's still fairly affordable. Between Anakin and him, I see them usually go like the $15 range, somewhere around there, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. But it's a solid action figure. This looks pretty close to Ewan McGregor. I think it's a good likeness. Definitely looks like Obi-Wan Kenobi, that is. The articulation is phenomenal on it. He does have hinged hips, which at the time was a big incentive. Not too many action figures had it. And he does, unlike Anakin, he does have hinged elbows, so that's a big bonus. And he's just a solid action figure. I still think to this day he's one of the best Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan Kenobis that we've gotten. And I think he was pretty much repacked into the vintage collection. I don't have the TBC Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan, but I'm pretty sure this is the same exact action figure, just with some slight modifications to it and some extra accessories. But he's a solid action figure and I recommend him for your collection. Figure number 8 here, another essential character for most Star Wars collections, and that's Hoth Luke. So the reason why I went with Hoth Luke is, unfortunately, a whole lot of Luke Skywalkers are pretty expensive out there. And even the ones that are affordable, I don't think are too good. There is a Saga 2003 Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi that's pretty good. But I think as far as likeness to Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker, this one's pretty good, and it's pretty close. This particular figure you're looking at is the Black Series action figure. It's not the TVC one, and the big difference you can tell between that is the TVC one has a scarf that you can wrap around his neck there, and the goggles. This one doesn't have that. He has the goggles on top of his hat there. But still a really good action figure. I know he's fairly affordable on the aftermarket. I see between the TVC one and this one, it doesn't really matter which one you get. They're usually somewhere in the like $10 range. You can get them at any time you want, and sometimes you might be lucky enough to find this one at retail still. I actually got this on clearance for about $6 on GameStop back around 2016. So I thought it was a solid deal, and it's a solid action figure, and he's held up really well over the years. It's a good enough Luke Skywalker to get the point across, and I think he's interesting enough where people would justify wanting him for their collection. Figure number 7 here is one that I hold very near and dear to me. This is actually one of the longest Star Wars action figures I've had in my collection, over 20 years at this point. And that is originally it's the Power of the Jedi Sand Trooper, but he was also re-released in the Saga original trilogy line, which is when I got this one. And it's a solid Sand Trooper. I really like it. He's not the most articulated Sand Trooper in the world, but he looks as accurate as can be. I really like him. He has some unique accessories. He has the binoculars there. I like the way the sand is applied on his armor there. And everything about it is perfect. Would highly recommend it for anyone's collection. And he's usually sometimes in the $5 range even, maybe the $10 range. Somewhere in that range. Either the Power of the Jedi or the Saga original trilogy figure. Either one is fine. And as far as I know, there's the same exact action figure. But everybody needs some troopers for the collection, and I think this is a solid stormtrooper to start off with for any foundation for a collection. So I highly recommend him. Figure number 6 here is the Phase 1 Clone Trooper. This one's seen so many releases over the years. I think originally he was released in 2003, and he received so many releases in the Saga Legends line after that, so he's fairly affordable. If you get one loose, you might be able to get one for $5. If you get one brand new, you might be in the $10 or $15 range, which I think is still reasonable for this action figure. And I still think arguably this is the best Phase 1 clone that we've gotten to date. I like it even more than the TVC Phase 1 clones. The helmet is proportioned right. He's got a little bit of a shine to his armor. Some of them do yellow over time, especially depending which era you get this. And this is the first one I actually got during the 30th anniversary line. And as you can see, he's got a little yellow in him. And the elastic band he has there is starting to rot away as well. But for an almost 20-year-old action figure at this point, he's affordable, he's solid. I don't think anybody can complain about this action figure. And lots of people would say that this is the best Phase 1 clone we've gotten to date. So you really need a couple clones to back up Anakin and Obi-Wan if you're going to start off this collection. So I highly recommend them. Figure number 5 here is the 30th anniversary Stormtrooper. So it is nice to have some Sand Troopers for your collection, but you also need some plain white Stormtroopers. And I think this one's a great contender, and it still holds up really well today. Is it the best Stormtrooper at this point? Not necessarily, but he's good enough to get the point across. You can do just about anything you could possibly want with him as far as poses and likeness goes. I think he looks really good. He's held up very well in my collection over the years. I've had him since the 30th anniversary days. He's a little scrawny in some ways, and he doesn't have hinged hips, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. He gets the point across, he's a solid Stormtrooper, and a lot of times I see this go maybe in the $10 to $15 range. If you get him brand new, if you get him loose, you might be able to get him less for that. But he's a solid Stormtrooper, and I think he holds up really well to this day. And I highly recommend him. Figure number 4 here is everyone's favorite bounty hunter, Boba Fett. So we've gotten so many Boba Fett releases in the TVC line in recent years. And this one you're looking at here has seen its fair share of releases. Pretty sure he was released in the Saga Collection days, and I know he was originally released in the VOTC line back in 2004, so for an almost 20-year-old Boba Fett, I think this one's really good. He has solid articulation. A couple interesting features about him that a lot of the Boba Fetts that followed him don't have is the movable rangefinder. Mine's kind of broken a little bit, so I can't move it, but in theory, he's supposed to have a movable rangefinder. The helmet looks pretty good. Not the best Boba Fett, I would say, at this point. The TVC Return of the Jedi Boba Fett will hold that place still. Again, similar to like the Clone Trooper and the Stormtrooper that I showed previously. He's good enough to get the point across. You look at him and it's clearly Boba Fett, and I don't think anybody would really complain about this action figure. And you always need a Boba Fett for your collection. Probably one of the most recognizable Star Wars characters. Top 5 easily. I recommend Boba Fett for your collection. Figure number 3 here is the ATT Tank Gunner. Probably the most affordable clone in Star Wars action figure history, and probably one of the best clones that Hasbro has ever made. The articulation is solid on it, and he has some of the best articulation that we've ever seen on a Star Wars action figure. The knee on mine's a little broken, so I can't pose them too well. But as you can see, you can do quite a bit with them. The hip articulation is phenomenal on this. I would argue even better than most of the modern clones that we get. And the best part about it is usually you can find them in the $5 to $10 range, brand new even. He was released in the Revenge of the Sith line and also followed up in the Saga Collection line, so he's seen his fair share of releases. And even if you don't want him as a tank gunner, you can take his pauldron off, and you can take this part of his helmet off, and you can just make him just a plain Phase 2 clone, if that's what you desire. So I highly recommend this for your collection. I also did feature this one on my top 10 favorite clone troopers, if you want to check that video out. Figure number 2 is, how can you have a Star Wars action figure collection without the man himself, Darth Vader? And this is the Revenge of the Sith Darth Vader. So I was looking at some of the TVC Darth Vaders, and the prices on those have gotten kind of outrageous. Even the earlier releases in the TVC line. There's an infinite amount of Darth Vaders that you can choose from. But I think the Revenge of the Sith one has held up really well over the years. It looks really good. I think the helmet on it is one of the best that we've ever seen for a Darth Vader. I've had this since the Revenge of the Sith line. I got this in 2005. And I don't think too many people have ever complained about this one over the years. He has seen his fair share of releases. I know he got a re-release as figure number 1 in the 30th anniversary line with the Coin album. And I think he may have got a few other ones here and there as well. So there's a lot in circulation out there, and he stayed in the $5, $10, $15 range over the years, even brand new. So if you can only have one Darth Vader for your collection, and you're not particular about having the best of the best, and you want one that's affordable, I think this one's a good contender for your collection. So for this last figure on the list, I debated about it really heavily as to what it was going to be, and after careful consideration, I decided to go with it, and that's another Sand Trooper here. But this one's the Saga Collection Sand Trooper from 2006, and I think this is a solid action figure. I do recall him being in high demand back in 2006. There was one time I was at the store, and I bumped into another collector there, and he was eagerly anticipating this one. He kept telling me about how he's been searching for the Sand Trooper for so long. And I'll never forget that. And at the time I was just a kid, and he was probably in his mid to late 20s, maybe even early 30s. So it's always nice when you bump into other collectors at the store. But that one always stuck out to me. And eventually, several years later, almost 10 years later actually, I decided to finally go ahead and get this. And I'm happy to have him for my collection. He has some unique accessories about him, like this staff here. And the way the dirt is applied on his armor, I think, is really good. You can also turn him into a regular stormtrooper if you want. You can just take the backpack off, and then you can put the thermal detonator on his back. And you can also pop his head off and take the pauldron off if you desire. So he's a solid sand trooper, and he's stayed relatively in the $10 to $15 range brand new over the years. So he's a solid sand trooper. I think that's held up over the years, and I highly recommend him for your collection. So that's my top 10 list of Star Wars action figures I would recommend for beginners. I know nobody's ever going to 100% agree on one list, there's so many possibilities out there, and some people are going to say, oh, what about this figure? What about that figure? And everyone's going to have different priorities as to what they want starting off. For 10 Star Wars action figures, I think you can't go wrong with having any of these. Right here, between the 10, you could probably get all these for relatively $100, which, yes, it's $100, but for 10 action figures in today's market, that's really good. And they're all great action figures. I think a lot of these are great contenders with even a lot of the TVC figures, and even with some of their TVC counterparts. I think they have a run for their money. I really feel for beginner collectors these days. It's not like when I started, when you can go to any retail store out there and you had aisles, you had sometimes 2, 3, 4 aisles even of Star Wars action figures to choose from. The pegs were just filled and you could always find exactly what you want. And action figures at that time were in the $3, $4, $5 range, and if they went on clearance, sometimes they go down to like $2, maybe even $1. And some of these were included in that time frame. Unfortunately, these days, you can hardly find anything at retail, and the few times you can, the figures are outrageously priced. We're at the point where it's $20 for a TVC figure and almost $40 even for a Black Series figure in most cases. So I really feel for collectors, especially younger collectors that might be under 18. When I was a kid, it was kind of doable if there's an action figure you really wanted. $5 is something you could work for. It's something that you could take the time to mow someone's lawn or water someone's plants for the day and get paid $5 and then go to the store and buy the action figure you want. Kids can't really do that these days, let alone struggling to find action figures that they may want at retail. So I think a lot of the magic for Star Wars action figure collecting has gone away, unfortunately, and at this point we're resorted to sites like eBay. It's become an online exclusive almost for Star Wars action figures. But anyways, I might save that subject for another time, as if Star Wars action figure collecting is dead or if it's at its best it's ever been. Save that for different videos at some point. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. And let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with this list? Do you disagree? I would love to hear from you. So that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for plenty more top 10 videos in the future. There will be more to come. And if you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate your support. And check out some of the links in the description as well. And thanks for watching.